Welcome to the Doctrine Deep Dive, where we take a stack of dense, complex source material and really pull out the crucial operational knowledge you need.
And today, we are tackling what is, I think, maybe the most complex challenge a military headquarters can face.
It has to be. We're doing a deep dive into urban operations, specifically at the division level.
It's a phenomenal challenge, and our mission today is to, conduct a really in-depth exploration of what it takes. We're talking intelligence preparation of the operational environment and the very, very careful application of the warfighting functions when the fight scales up to a division.
And to guide our analysis, we're drawing from two foundational texts. The first is Army Techniques Publication 201.3, which is focused on intelligence preparation of the operational environment. We're using Change 3 from May 2025.
And the second one is Army Techniques Publication 306, which is dedicated entirely to urban operations. That one incorporates Change 1 from June 2025. These documents, they really govern the essence of how our forces have to think about the city.
They really do. And, we should probably start with the quote that just sets the stakes perfectly. It's from General Mark Milley.
Ah, yes. If war is about politics, it is going to be fought where people live. It will be fought, in my opinion, in urban areas.
That quote is the strategic hook, isn't it? It just moves the whole conversation away from, abstract battlefield geometry.
Right.
And it puts it squarely in the political and, the societal center of gravity. For a division staff, they aren't just planning for destruction anymore.
No, not at all. They are planning for the strategic consequences of operating where most people actually live.
Exactly. Our focus today is that complexity that just explodes when a division has to shift from open terrain to planning and executing in these incredibly dense areas.
It is a multidimensional puzzle. It requires a level of synchronization, of resource allocation, and really a fundamental shift in how intelligence is gathered and used that is just, it's unprecedented.
Okay, so let's start by unpacking this operational environment. When we talk about urban operations, the Army has a very specific definition that really anchors everything else.
It does. It's about operations planned and conducted on or against objectives on a topographical complex and its adjacent terrain. But the key part is where man-made construction or the density of the population are the dominant features.
That phrasing is so critical because it immediately tells you the problem is defined by two things: the density of buildings and the density of people.
Which is why the doctrine defines the core complexity through a concept called the urban triad.
The triad. This feels like the absolute starting point for any intelligence preparation of the operational environment in a city.
All right.
So what are those three inseparable components?
Okay, so the three elements are: 1, the complex man-made physical terrain; 2, a population of significant size and density; and 3, the supporting infrastructure that, holds it all together.
And they're inseparable because they're massively interdependent.
Massively. The density of the population requires complex infrastructure power, water, internet, and all of that infrastructure is housed within or creates the complex man-made terrain. You can't touch one without affecting the other two.
So if a division commander decides to, say, target an enemy command post inside a big city, that's never just a kinetic decision.
Never. It is immediately political because of that urban triad.
Right.
If you hit the building, you degrade the man-made terrain. Simple enough. But if that building also houses a power substation or a key communications node, you've just impacted the infrastructure.
Which then immediately affects the population. Widespread power outages, hospitals go dark, commerce stops.
Exactly. That ripple effect elevates a tactical action to the strategic level in an instant. The division staff has to analyze all three simultaneously, or they risk creating a crisis that's far worse than the tactical gain they just achieved.
I think the biggest analytical shift for a staff officer moving from a brigade to a division is just grasping the sheer scale involved.
Oh, absolutely. The source documents, they categorize cities by population, and for a division, the key category to know is a divisional city. That's a city with a population between 100,000 and just under 200,000 inhabitants.
And that density, it puts a strain on the force that's geometric, not linear. You see this so clearly when you look at the vertical dimension.
Yes. The example from the doctrine is perfect for this. It illustrates the capacity strain. Take a relatively small area, something like 110 meters by 70 meters.
Okay, so that's about 7,700 square meters on the ground. Not huge.
Not huge at all. But then project that same footprint vertically across just 5 levels and 5 stories is not a tall building in most cities.
Suddenly you've created 38,500 square meters of terrain to deal with.
38,500. The terrain itself multiplies the problem. It demands exponentially more infantry, more intelligence assets, more sustainment, just to clear and secure that one small city block.
That is the ultimate aha moment for urban planning, isn't it? You just cannot analyze terrain in 2 dimensions anymore. That depth, that breadth, and that height, they extend the commander's area of operations into 4 distinct dimensions of urban space.
Right, let's walk through those top to bottom. We start with the airspace.
So this is where your helicopters and your aerial munitions operate.
Yes, but in a city, it's broken up by buildings of all different heights. And this creates the infamous urban canyon effect.
And the urban canyon effect, it sounds cool, but it's a huge operational constraint, a major hazard.
It's a serious combat risk. It causes higher, totally unpredictable wind speeds and turbulence. This directly impacts fire support, it degrades precision, and that increases the risk of collateral damage or even fratricide.
And for helicopters?
It makes rotary wing operations incredibly risky. They're forced to either fly way above the buildings or very low and very fast, which severely limits their ability to provide sustained observation or hovering fire support.
Okay, so below the airspace, we have the supersurface. Rooftops, high-rise floors, elevated platforms.
Control of the supersurface is all about observation and denial. For the enemy, these are prime spots for snipers, for observation posts, for anti-armor or anti-aircraft weapons.
So for friendly forces, controlling it is essential for security. If you don't secure the rooftops, your ground force is just exposed.
Constantly exposed to direct fire from above, you have to clear and hold them.
Then we've got the surface, the traditional ground level. Streets, parks, roads.
This is your main area for mounted maneuver, but even that is heavily constrained. Street patterns, rubble, civilian traffic, it all complicates movement and forces you into predictable, canalized routes. It requires continuous, aggressive route clearance.
And finally, we get to the dimension that I think is the biggest intelligence challenge, the subsurface.
Tunnels, subway systems, sewers, basements, utility networks. The source material is very, very clear about the unique danger here.
They're the most restrictive and easiest to defend or block, right?
Exactly. They allow threat forces to achieve surprise, to store supplies, and, most dangerously, to maneuver against the rear and flanks of your surface forces, completely bypassing your front lines. Subsurface analysis becomes a primary, high-priority intelligence requirement.
Okay, so once we've established those 4 dimensions, we can move into the actual intelligence preparation of the operational environment process. Specifically, step 2, describing environmental effects.
And the classic toolkit still applies. The military aspects of terrain, or OAKV, observation in fields of fire, avenues of approach, key terrain, obstacles, and cover and concealment.
But the analysis has to be completely customized for this vertical, dense environment.
Completely. Take observation in fields of fire. In open terrain, you look for high ground. In a city, the challenge isn't just elevation, it's the pervasive visual dead space created by all the buildings.
So you could have a clear view for miles down a major avenue.
But everything in the first 50 meters to your left or right or on the floors below you is completely concealed from your view.
A commander might have great strategic observation, but zero tactical observation on the street corner where the actual fight is happening.
That's the tension. The doctrine notes that the ideal open field of fire for direct fire weapons is just exceedingly rare in cities. This forces the attacker into close quarters combat, whether they want to or not.
Okay, so next up is avenues of approach. In a city, this is all about street patterns.
Right, and the staff has to categorize them. You have grid patterns, like Manhattan, which are predictable but offer the enemy interlocking fields of fire. You have radial patterns, like Paris, which funnel movement. And then you have irregular patterns, common in older cities, which are the most challenging for an attacker to navigate and synchronize.
And analyzing these patterns helps predict the enemy's defense.
It does. If you see a big modern boulevard, you can bet the enemy sees it too. They'll know it's a high-speed avenue of approach for a division-level force.
So they'll structure their whole defense around it. Obstacles, anti-armor, everything.
Exactly. The analysis becomes less about finding a route and more about predicting the most likely route the enemy will defend.
And at the division level, you're not just stuck on the streets. You have to account for air and maritime avenues of approach.
Absolutely. When the roads are blocked or defended, air corridors for helicopters, or using rivers for boats, become critical options. They can provide the surprise and speed a division needs to bypass the main fight and seize key terrain in the enemy's rear.
Which brings us to key terrain. You mentioned this is a much more complex idea in a city. It's not just about elevation.
No, it's defined by its functional, political, economic, or social significance. We're looking for anything that gives a marked advantage or disproportionately affects the population or the government.
And the list is long. Tall buildings, bridges, government buildings, financial districts.
And crucially, what the source calls out is media infrastructure. Television stations, internet hubs, radio towers.
Because controlling the narrative is key.
It can be the decisive factor. If the enemy controls how the population gets information, they control the population's perception of the entire operation. That infrastructure is absolutely key terrain.
Finally, let's hit obstacles and cover and concealment. They're everywhere, but we need to be clear about the difference.
The distinction is operational. Cover gives you protection from the effects of fires. Think reinforced concrete buildings, thick walls. Concealment just gives you protection from observation. That could be anything from fog to a simple interior wall.
And a city offers a nearly infinite amount of both.
It does. But there's a nuance with the subterranean systems. While they offer incredible concealment from the surface, the cover inside a narrow utility tunnel can be minimal.
Right, so an attacking force moving through them is actually very vulnerable.
Very vulnerable. The defender can use the tunnel structure to canalize the attackers, and any firefight in that confined space is incredibly difficult to control. The attacker often loses the benefit of cover that they have in the buildings above ground.
We've done a great job on the man-made terrain, but as we said with the urban triad, that's only 1/3 of the problem. We have to turn to the human dimension now, civil considerations.
This is the decisive strategic factor. We analyze this using the characteristics: areas, structures, capabilities, organizations, people, and events, or asset-scope.
And focusing on this is essential because every single kinetic action affects the populace.
It does, and that inevitably impacts the force's ability to transition to a stable post-combat environment. For the division staff, understanding the relationship between the operation and the population is paramount.
The doctrine sets out 3 core objectives for the commander when it comes to civilians, doesn't it? It seems like a very complex balancing act.
It is. First, you have to minimize interference between civilians and your operations. That could mean information campaigns to encourage them to leave, or setting up safe havens.
Second, you have to maximize population support for your operations.
Which you achieve through security, resolving grievances, providing basic services. And third, you have to meet or exceed all legal, moral, and humanitarian obligations.
And failure on any of those points, you risk turning the population against you.
And if that happens, you've created a hostile environment that gives every advantage to the enemy.
So achieving those objectives means you need a deep understanding of the city's infrastructure. The doctrine calls it a system of systems.
That holistic view is non-negotiable for a division staff. The infrastructure is broken down into 6 interdependent categories.
Okay, what are they?
You've got economics and commerce, administration and human services, energy, so electricity and fuel, cultural sites, communications and information, and transportation and distribution.
And it's crucial to see it as a system of systems because of their interdependence.
Exactly. The doctrine specifically calls out communications and information as the link that binds all the others. If you take out a major communications hub, you don't just stop phone calls.
You stop bank transfers, you disrupt the control systems for water and power, you paralyze the local government.
Precisely. Understanding that ripple effect gives you critical operational advantages. You can degrade the enemy's effectiveness by controlling power or water. But conversely, if you destroy that same infrastructure, your own stability tasks later become exponentially harder. You have to rebuild what you broke.
Okay, let's pivot to the tools you need to manage the most dynamic part of that triad. The population itself. Biometrics and identity intelligence have become absolutely essential.
In a dense urban environment, they're incredibly powerful for helping the commander discriminate between combatants and non-combatants. Biometrics, we're talking facial images, fingerprints, DNA, helps you verify someone's identity with certainty.
Even if they're using fake papers or aliases. And identity intelligence is what really solves the anonymity problem.
That's the core utility. Identity intelligence uses high-volume data analysis to link an individual to their past activities, their aliases, their locations. In an environment where the enemy is deliberately trying to hide among the people, this capability is vital. It allows you to pull insurgents or criminals out of the general population.
Now let's shift focus directly to the adversary. This is step 3 and 4 of the intelligence preparation of the operational environment process, evaluating and determining threat courses of action.
And it starts with categorizing who you're actually fighting. The doctrine gives us three main categories.
First are regular threats.
Right, your conventional military assets from a peer or near-peer nation-state, they're generally governed by international law. Then you have irregular threats.
These are your insurgents, terrorists, guerrilla fighters using asymmetric methods.
Exactly. They're trying to counter a technological overmatch.
Yeah.
And the most challenging, I think, in modern conflict is the hybrid threat.
The complex blend.
It's a combination of two or more of those groups, regular, irregular criminal, who team up to achieve mutual goals. A nation-state might use its regular military to provide fire support for irregular proxy forces who are doing the dirty work on the ground. It's very difficult to analyze.
But regardless of the category, the urban area gives a huge advantage to any threat trying to counter technological superiority.
A massive advantage. They use the city's depth, breadth, and height to slow the attacker down, break them into small units, and operate in terrain that degrades our precision and technology.
This often involves proxy forces, which introduces that whole layer of non-attributional coercion.
Yes, and that's a key point in the doctrine. A nation-state can support a proxy force to achieve its foreign policy goals, like political interference or limited objectives, without the direct risk of intervention. They maintain plausible deniability. The city provides the perfect cover for these proxies to operate.
And analyzing all these different groups makes developing threat courses of action incredibly hard for a division staff.
So you have to move from broad models to very specific predictive tools. The process starts with threat templates. These fuse intelligence and doctrine to predict what the enemy might do, say, a mechanized infantry defense plan for a specific district.
And once the staff has a few of these possible courses of action, like an area defense or a mobile defense, how do they consolidate them for the commander?
That's where you overlay them to create the final event template. This is the key product. It highlights the decision points for the commander and identifies the named areas of interest.
So a named area of interest is a specific spot on the map where, if something happens, it tells you which plan the enemy is following.
Exactly. A confirmed sighting of a specific type of enemy equipment in a certain area might confirm that they're adopting their area defense plan, which then allows the commander to trigger a pre-planned friendly response.
The whole point of this process is to avoid surprise, and that comes down to identifying the right indicators and warning signals.
Identifying and monitoring those indicators is the absolute pinnacle of intelligence analysis. These are specific bits of information that signal the enemy's intent. They're forward-looking, not historical.
So what are some tangible examples? What would a division staff be looking for in a city to see a shift in the enemy's plan?
You'd look for specific observable things. If they're setting up a strong positional defense, you'd see a lot of Class 4 materials, construction supplies, and Class 5 mines and munitions being moved into position.
So engineering work.
A lot of it. Or if you see specialized anti-tank teams moving to the front, that's a clear indicator they intend to contest your armored approach. On the other hand, if you see a mass movement of non-combatants out of a sector, that could mean the enemy is clearing the battlefield for their own major offensive. All these little data points have to be integrated continuously to build that actionable event template.
Okay, we've established the environment and the threat. Now we need to look at how friendly forces actually fight in the city. And the urban environment strains every single one of the warfighting functions, starting with command and control.
Oh, it challenges the fundamental principle of unity of command. A division might be forced to operate in non-contiguous areas, with units isolated by terrain. Command and control systems are just inherently degraded.
And the city's structure itself degrades the technology. All that concrete and steel creates electromagnetic dead space, which makes radio communication unreliable.
Exactly. And you couple that technical friction with the human challenge. The sheer volume of information, the data overload from sensors, from surveillance, from ground reports, it can just overwhelm a command post.
This complexity also drives a really significant operational risk: the high rate of leader casualties.
Historically, urban operations result in higher leader casualties. The terrain forces leaders to move closer to the front lines just to maintain awareness and control. And that proximity makes them high-value targets.
So overcoming these command and control challenges is really about enabling mission command down to the lowest possible level.
It has to be. Decentralized decision-making is not a choice. It's a necessity.
Okay, let's move to movement and maneuver. This has to be a seamless, combined arms operation. And the doctrine is just unequivocal. Infantry is the foundation.
It's the essential building block. Infantry are the only ones who can destroy the enemy in buildings, in bunkers, and in those critical subterranean areas where tanks can't go.
But they can't do it alone. The armored vehicles provide the protection and the heavy firepower.
It's a critical symbiosis. The armor protects the infantry from small arms fire, and the infantry, in turn, has to cover the armor's blind spots.
So the infantry is looking out for anti-tank teams on rooftops or in basements.
Those are the primary killers of armor in the city. The infantry has to suppress or clear those positions. And when you're moving in columns, if you fail to clear the route, you're just exposing yourself to close-range ambush.
And the doctrine makes a key distinction here. Just clearing a route isn't enough.
No, it's temporary. Once a route is cleared, it has to be continuously secured or at least observed. Otherwise, the enemy will just infiltrate back in behind you and set up a new ambush. It's a constant, resource-intensive task.
What about aviation's role in movement and maneuver? Vertical envelopment and air assault sounds like a great way to bypass all these ground-level problems.
It sounds tempting, but it carries immense risk because of that urban canyon effect we talked about. The doctrine actually advises against sustained hovering fire.
Because it just exposes the aircraft for too long.
For way too long. To numerous concealed enemy positions. Attack aviation should be using standoff capabilities, using speed, making quick running and diving attacks to apply precision effects, and then getting out of the threat area fast.
That focus on precision really magnifies the constraints on the fire's warfighting function. The city impacts fires right from the start, from just finding a place to put the guns.
It does. A division staff will struggle to find enough space for an artillery battery that has the proper unmasked gun line needed for certain types of munitions.
An unmasked gun line. So a clear path for the shell to travel before it arms.
Exactly. Certain fuses, like for illumination rounds, need to travel a specific distance before they're active. In a city, finding that clear shot while also being protected from enemy fire is incredibly difficult.
And the artillery positions themselves are vulnerable.
They're huge targets. They have a large thermal and electromagnetic signature. This means you have to plan for local security, and you have to conduct frequent, rapid survivability moves after firing to avoid counter-battery fire.
And then there's the dilemma of precision versus collateral damage. Commanders want to keep infrastructure intact.
So the guidance is to use non-lethal, precision, or less destructive munitions whenever possible. Staffs have to do meticulous collateral damage estimates, which often leads to strict limits on what kind of fires can be used.
Finally, let's look at the sustainment and logistics warfighting function. In a city, logistics can't rely on operational pauses.
No, it has to be continuous and anticipatory. The logistics network is operating over dispersed, often non-contiguous terrain. It requires more security and more frequent resupply missions to small, sometimes isolated units.
And the sheer volume of specific supplies needed is amplified. What are the key classes of supply that urban defense planning has to prioritize?
The doctrine points to a clear, amplified demand in 4 areas. Class 4, which is construction material for fortifications. Class 5, ammunition, especially anti-personnel and anti-tank. Class 8, medical supplies because casualties are high and evacuation is hard. And Class 9, repair parts because the terrain just chews up vehicles.
That covers the combat phase. But what about the sustainment demands after a successful offensive?
This is the critical, often overlooked point. A successful offensive will immediately attract civilians to the area you now control. Refugees, displaced persons, people seeking security.
So your sustainment burden suddenly triples.
At least. Because now you have to provide life support, food, water, medical care, to a massive influx of civilians. This has to be planned for in advance, or the security you just won will rapidly degrade into a humanitarian crisis.
Let's wrap up by looking at the operational approaches: offense, defense, and stability. Starting with urban offensive operations, the resource requirements are so high that the commander faces a big decision right away: the decision to bypass.
That's a strategic choice to economize forces. The doctrine is clear that you often won't have enough capacity to control every single city. So you have to plan for either isolating a city, maybe with a holding force, or foregoing it entirely to save your strength for the main objective.
But bypassing comes with the risk of leaving an enemy stronghold in your rear area.
It's a risk calculation. The 2004 Battle of Fallujah is a great case study of a force that decided not to bypass, but to execute a rapid, violent penetration.
Operation ALFAJR. What made it so doctrinally significant in terms of managing the population?
It was the Phase 1 shaping operation. The coalition used information operations to encourage about 80% of the civilian population to leave the city before the main assault.
Which directly mitigated that population part of the urban triad.
It drastically reduced the risk of civilian casualties and allowed the ground forces to operate with far less friction and restraint. It was a critical preparatory step.
That shaping operation ties into the whole dilemma of the Golden Bridge, the choice of leaving a corridor open for people to flee.
This is pure strategic risk management. If you seal a city completely, you trap the population, which can lead to a humanitarian catastrophe. But if you leave a golden bridge open, you accept the risk that the enemy will use it for reinforcement and resupply.
And we have the cautionary tale of Grozny from 1994.
In Grozny, the Russians left a corridor open that the Chechens exploited to prolong the fight. But then you look at Mosul in 2017, where Iraqi forces left a corridor open, accepting some risk to allow for civilian evacuation. The commander has to weigh the operational risk against the strategic and humanitarian imperatives.
And if the offense is successful, the staff has to be clear on the final step, consolidation. And we have to distinguish between consolidation of forces and consolidate gains.
Right. Consolidation of forces is tactical. It's organizing a new position, preparing for a counterattack. Consolidate gains is strategic. It's about the actions you take to make that temporary success enduring. It's the process that allows you to transition control to civilian authorities. It's what translates military momentum into political success.
Shifting gears to urban defensive operations, why would a division choose to defend a city, given how demanding it is?
The purposes are vast. To defeat an enemy, buy time, economize forces, protect political institutions, and the terrain itself gives the defender distinct advantages.
How does it do that? How does the terrain frustrate an attacking division?
The compartmented terrain breaks up the attacking force, which makes it hard for them to support each other. This allows the defender to use interior lines and even things like mouse holes cut through walls or tunnels to launch surprise counterattacks against the attacker's exposed flanks.
And the historical gold standard for this is Stalingrad.
Stalingrad is the classic example. The Soviet 62nd Army used the city's fortress-like industrial buildings for a tactical defense that bled the German 6th Army white. That tenacious urban defense bought the Soviet high commands time to assemble forces for the decisive counterattack that ultimately trapped the Germans. The city fight achieved the strategic goal of enemy culmination.
So the ultimate goal, whether through offense or defense, is stability and transition.
And the primary task in stability operations is establishing civil security. The doctrine calls it the most resource-intensive stability task, and it's the necessary precursor to everything else. You have to protect the population and restore public order first.
And when you're doing intelligence preparation of the operational environment for stability, the focus fundamentally shifts.
It does. A greater emphasis has to be placed on civil considerations, the ASCO or variables, than on the enemy. You're looking for sectarian fault lines, criminal organizations, infrastructure weaknesses, and you have to be actively planning to transition control to legitimate civilian authorities from day one.
Which involves security cooperation.
Yes, the Department of Defense working with foreign security partners to build their capacity. The key is that the assistance from military forces is always temporary. The commander has to constantly envision and set the conditions for that transition to ensure enduring success.
You know, what really stands out to me from diving into these sources is just the sheer exponential difficulty that a division commander faces in the city. Success hinges on a continuous synthesis of intelligence preparation of the operational environment to really grasp that urban triad.
That's right. Verticality, population density, infrastructure complexity, and then you have to translate that understanding into a resource-intensive plan.
And that plan has to be built on robust combined arms, where infantry is paramount, but supported by precision fires and protected maneuver.
But the critical piece for a division commander is that proactive planning for the post-combat environment. You have to account for that immense sustainment burden for the civilians. That's the heart of consolidating gains.
You mentioned time compression earlier, and the doctrine really highlights this as the single most critical friction factor.
Yes. The urban environment severely compresses the time available to think and act at the tactical level. It forces your small unit leaders, your platoon and company commanders, to rely on superior training, crystal clear mission orders, and decentralized command and control just to overcome the friction of the city fight.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner looking at division operations?
I think it means that while military forces have to maintain a decisive combat capability, ultimate success in the city is often determined by factors far outside the kinetic fight. The political objectives remind us that success isn't always about destruction. It's often determined by winning the battle of perceptions and ideas among the population.
So ensuring a legitimate transition that supports your strategic goals.
Exactly. And that requires integrated planning for the information dimension and for civil stability from the very beginning. You have to recognize that the task extends far, far beyond the duration of the initial fight. It's about securing an enduring political outcome.